We're dancing. It's Friday. Hello, everyone. I'm Lauren Van Hemert from Beltline to Broadway, and I am here with bwaySHO, Shoshana, Medney. Not using the last name anymore. She's just SHO to us.
Hello, everyone.
And of course, if you have any questions or comments as we're chatting, feel free to put them into the chat and we'll get to them. We're both journalists, so we're on it. Thank you for hanging out with me this afternoon. I'm so excited about this because it's nice to commiserate with someone who understands.
Very true. Well, I'm just grateful you asked.
It's so much fun. So what's so interesting about you and a lot of the other people I've met through this pandemic is you and I are not actors. We are theater adjacent, theater fans. And we both come to it from a broadcast background. So talk to me about your TV days, working with the affiliates CBS and NBC. Talk to me about your on-camera experience and off-camera experience. But I think everybody, gets very excited about the on-camera experience.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, let's just dive right in. It is kind of crazy when I think back to those on-camera days because the people who knew me back then, like I was doing a live report every single day, like live at 4:30, 5, 6 p.m. Sometimes I would do the morning show. Sometimes I would do the evening show. So I will just rewind for a second and share. So I worked at CBS 7 in West Texas, this nice Jewish girl from New York in West Texas. That was quite the experience. I made so many great friends that I still stay in touch with. And it was quite the experience. I had gotten my journalism degree from University of Maryland. Go Terps.
Yay.
And
excellent communication school.
Yes. Oh my goodness. The J School is awesome. I miss it. I used to do tours there and I would do the journalism panel. Anyway, that feels like a lifetime ago, which is crazy because it wasn't like that long ago. I graduated in 2014, but those were some great, great years. So we'll start there. So I went there. I interned at Comcast SportsNet, which is now NBC Sports Washington for anyone who is like, wait, isn't that something different? But it was Comcast SportsNet when I was there. And then I also interned at WTOP Radio, News, Traffic, and Weather together on the 8s.
And you still have the radio thing down. I love it.
I still got it. Once you have it, you can't let it go. And yeah, I mean, it's it all really started there because, nowadays, as you do as well, we're chatting with these like very famous Broadway people, which it can be so cool and a little overwhelming sometimes, but it's helpful to like think back when I'm hearing a little feedback. Are you?
I am not hearing feedback, but I can certainly plug in my headphones if need be, but I'm not hearing feedback.
I'm going to put these little things in. So stand by, everyone. Let's make sure that
don't y'all love technology?
You just love it. Let's see. I feel like I'm taking over your thing. I just want to make sure that this is working.
No. We want it to sound great. While you are doing that, I'm going to put up your website. So SHO has a live chat with lots of Broadway people on YouTube, and then she has podcasts. So you can check out the website and find both. So I put the little plug in while we're.
Thank you. Yes, I love that. This is so interesting. I did an interview yesterday and my headphones weren't working properly. You know what? I'm sure if it sounds okay to you, then I'm sure it is good. Just this, technology. Who needs it?
I'm not hearing any feedback. If you out there on Facebook or YouTube are hearing feedback, let us know and we will make some adjustments. But if not, we're just going to plow through because we have a lot to cover.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. So I will try to wrap up my origin story as quickly as possible here. So when I worked at WTOP, I covered a lot of sports, and I mean, it was pretty crazy. I was a freshman, and they just like gave me a microphone and a recorder, and were like, "All right, go interview Alex Ovechkin," and all like these very famous athletes. And then the biggest moment that like defined my freshman year was I got to interview this English guy that everyone quite loves. And you might know him as David Beckham.
Ooh. Very exciting. So were you a sports? So this is so funny to me. I was the sports editor of my high school newspaper. I am not a sports person at all. I had to like look up certain terminology. Were you a sports person at least?
Oh, yeah.
A sports fan?
Okay. Very much. Yeah. Before Broadway, I really wanted to be a reporter for the Olympics. And sports was very much my route. Like I volunteered at the 2016 Rio Olympics. I went to the 2012 Olympics in London. Like I love sports. And that was kind of my gateway to Broadway, because it's all like entertainment, right? It's a very different type of entertainment, but
you're still dealing with agents and publicists, and yes. You mentioned the Olympics, so I want to go there for a second because I find this so cool. You were a volunteer at the 2016 Summer Olympics. My daughter is obsessed with Simone Biles and the gymnastics team. So talk to me about that experience and knowing what you know from that experience. What do you think? How is the Olympics going to look this summer?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it was, I mean, that experience was phenomenal, right? To be a spy on the inside and get to have this experience where you're just like interacting. And I'm conversational in Portuguese, so I was really interacting a lot with the athletes and the journalists and kind of being that person that could speak to both sides of it. So that was really, really cool, being able to be the language communicator. I mean, of course, there were a lot of other people who spoke both languages, but with the journalism background. All that being said, I mean, it was amazing. We would get last minute tickets to shows, you see, when you talk Broadway, now all of a sudden, what are sports? Sports ball. We would get last minute tickets to a game. So we would be at the media center, and all of a sudden they'd be like, in 20 minutes, there's a diving competition if you want it. And we would like run across the center. Yeah, give us all of it. And it was amazing. I saw the Brazilian men win the gold. That was so cool. And being a dual citizen, that was like very fulfilling. So all that being said, I'm very curious to see how it's going to be without the ability to like be this close to everyone. I mean, we were meeting people from all over the world, taking photos and interacting. Like it was all very, very close, very packed quarters. There were a lot of people, with a lot of people not speaking the same language. And it didn't really matter at the time because you spoke the same language of sports and Olympics and all that. But I'm very curious what the fan situation is, let alone the athletes, because, they're also intermingling as much as possible. It was such a fabulous experience. I hope that it's still really strong for them.
I do too. I know we will be watching it because my daughter's obsessed with gymnastics and swimming. And so I'm sure we will be watching it. Yeah. In other sports news, before we leave sports and go on to theater, I know people are like, what are they talking about? Quidditch, you?
Yeah. Yep. That's a big part of my life.
So explain the Quidditch. I mean, people actually, I'm old, so I'm a lot older than you, but people actually play Quidditch.
Oh yeah, it's a huge thing. And I feel like before I get into all the fun of it, I do have to like make a quick preference and say I very much stand with the trans community. I like if we knew then what we knew now about JK, like I don't know what the community would have been like, but when I started playing, I'm not necessarily old, but I'm old in like the Quidditch world of when we started. And I mean, we didn't have it. It was just all positive back then, right? It was just this like magical sport from Harry Potter where we found this community of nerds, of people who were athletic, but also nerdy. And it was this like magical combination of everything that I loved. And I mean, I don't know. It's really awful, everything she's saying. And we stand against that. And there's been a lot of separation between Quidditch, the sport, and Quidditch from Harry Potter. So I just like, before I get into what a great experience that was for me, I just like it. Harry Potter is obviously very tainted now, and it has a very different.
And it's hard to compartmentalize, right? Because these are books that mean, and stories that mean so much to so many people. And yet the author's actions have been so hurtful. And how do you, I did a conversation with a trans friend of mine, and we had this very conversation, you know, how do you compartmentalize your feelings for the series and her?
Yeah.
It's complicated, but I thought that was very cool on your resume. So I wanted to ask you about it, but I do want to ask you, so you mentioned the trans thing. Let's stick with that for a second. You moderated Jagged Little Pill. Okay. So Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, they've gotten a lot of attention for J.K. Rowling's comments. But Jagged Little Pill is getting a lot of negative attention right now because of their lack of representation. And you were part of a panel discussion yesterday. So how did that go?
Yeah, you know, I was just so grateful. Dr. Drama, Lisa Hurwitz, asked me to moderate, and I was so grateful because I really stand with the trans community. And as a cis ally, sometimes the best thing I can do is just, you know, show that I am standing with them and then just step back and listen to what they're saying. And that's really what I got to do yesterday, which was I moderated all the comments. I let people into the group. And if anyone said anything that's transphobic or offensive, my goal was to just remove them immediately. And gratefully, we didn't have to do that. Everything was very like respectful. People shared their comments, but it was all within the realm of, you know, the same feelings of just feeling hurt by the show, not negative towards, you know, the community. So yeah, yesterday it was really, really wonderful. There was this group of people, and you can actually watch it on YouTube now. It's up on Dr. Drama's YouTube channel. And it was talking about how in Boston, Joe was a non-binary trans character. I didn't see it there, but from all the conversations I've had with people and the receipts, you know, from Twitter and whatnot, it was, Joe was non-binary. That's how the character was written. And you ought to know was specifically even more powerful because Joe was misgendered by the one person in the world who they thought really got them. So it's like, you're taking this piece that makes it so powerful. Then you go to Broadway and you're like, oh no, Joe's always been cis. And you're like, but Joe hasn't always been cis. And I think a lot of the conversation, especially yesterday, was if they had made Joe cis, but they were honest about it, like it kind of would have sucked, but okay. Changes happen when you go to Broadway. I mean, we know that changes happen all the time. And Jagged Little Pill has so many different boxes that they're trying to, you know, tick off with the opioid addiction and the racial identities, especially like Black daughter in a white
racial adoption.
White family. And then you've got the sexual assault. Like there are just so many storylines that if you're not going to keep all of them as authentic and strong, you know, we thought that there might be some changes from Boston to New York. It is unfortunate that one of those storylines was a trans non-binary identity storyline that was taken away. But what was worse was that it was gaslit as if it never existed in the first place. So that's what a lot of the conversation was yesterday. And I think it's just important to hold space for people to have these conversations and to be like, no, this was really hurtful and offensive to me. And I wish that they like understood that if you're gonna, like they did this video, the JLP, producers and some of the people involved.
A whole series of videos. It's not just on this. It's a whole series. Yeah. They should have you and I moderating that, honestly, because
that would be great. Yeah, I think honesty, right? Like, we make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. No one's not no one. There are people who are upset about the storyline change. Very much, very valid. But it's just the fact that they've been like, no, we're sorry that you thought that was what it was. And it's like, no, but it was what it was. We didn't.
It was.
So it was just a really important conversation to have yesterday. And I was just very grateful to be a part of it and, chat with everyone in the comments and read a lot of the comments out loud and share just like how many people felt the same way. Because it can feel so isolating when you feel this way, especially a show that you might have loved, right? Like I saw a Jagged Little Pill 3 times on Broadway. I really liked it. And as a cis ally, I felt really taken advantage of that. Like they thought that they could just like get away with saying something. And I'm like, no, you have to be honest. And what's the point of being an ally if you're not actually going to stand up for your friends? And so that's kind of what yesterday was about.
It's so interesting because my response to Jagged Little Pill, I saw it on the first preview night in New York. And my response was not very positive, which had nothing to do with Joe's character. In fact, I thought Lauren Patton did an amazing job. I still think Elizabeth Stanley should win lots of awards because her performance was crazy good and so controlled and measured so that by the time at least for me, by the time I realized that this is her story, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Something happened. So my problem with Jagged Little Pill was that there were so many social justice issues crammed into this one show that I felt like almost all of them got a little bit diluted. I was like, okay, can you just pick one? Like one would be enough, maybe 2, but like we cannot change all the world's problems with one show. Maybe you should write a series of shows. But that was my big issue with it, is that it was really trying to almost check too many boxes. For me.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough situation where I feel like no matter what, people aren't going to be happy per se of like, why didn't you do more? Why didn't you do less? Why didn't you do this? But as long as you go into it with honesty, and what I'm a little confused about, honestly, and we can talk about this subject as much as you want. I am an open book about it, but they were so excited to share how they had like these people to make sure that everything was done right. Like I forget the word that they use, but
like an advisory panel, but there's some special word that they're using for it. Yeah,
exactly. And it just feels like if you're so proud of having an advisory panel and your community is saying you did this wrong, then your advisory panel needs to like advise you to make some changes.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think it's okay to say you made a mistake, but own up to that.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of us, and I want to go back to broadcasting for a second, and we're going to get back to theater. We're going to circle back around to theater, but there are so many people who were in broadcast journalism that I know, including myself. I interviewed Penn Holderness. He said the same thing from the Holderness family. Broadcast news is a tough biz, and for me, it burnt me out. Penn has talked about how he was ready for a change so he could spend more time with his family and kids and have a better quality of life. Were you getting burnt out of the broadcast biz? Or that side of it, anyway.
Yes.
Network biz.
Yes. Yeah, I kind of went away from my CBS 7 chat and went over to my like college years. But yeah, I mean, working at CBS 7 was great, and it prepared me for like everything you could ever need in a journalism career and making your own website. But like I said, sometimes I would be in the morning show, the afternoon show, and the night show. And then, there's a fire. This happened all the time. Very unfortunately, West Texas, very, very hot, very dry. And so you would be about to end your shift at, let's say 7:00. Then there's a fire. Now you're going to be there for hours. And they're like, we need you to go live at 11 p.m. Okay, that's what it is. And then I would have like the morning show, the Trending Now segment that I had, and I had to get there at 2:30 in the morning. And you're like, this is just not sustainable. I can't go to sleep at, 12:30. Yeah. Wake up at 1, shower, get ready, have a cup of coffee, and then do it all over again. It's just, you can do it for a little while. I think anyone who's like young enough and healthy enough can, if your mindset is, this is what I have to do in the industry to move forward. It's unfortunate, but you go into it knowing it. But then it happens too much. And then you get into your second year and you're like, someone else should be taking this over. Why am I still having these ridiculous hours? And then, it's exhausting. It's exhausting having to find a new story, new interviews. You're going live every day, multiple times a day. You always have to be on, which, I think especially now changing over to bwaySHO, I try to make it like way more real, right? Like if I'm exhausted or I'm having a really bad anxiety attack, I try to be as open and honest about it, because I think when you're on TV, there's like this perfection that you're supposed to be able to just go live, even if you're having a really, really bad day. Like I had gotten really bad news one day and I said, like, I don't think I can go live today. Can we just do like a VSV, like a package is when you have like everything's put together and they just run it, and a VSV is kind of read by the anchors. And I remember they just like didn't allow that to happen. And I like kept stumbling over my words, like, which in and of itself, I have a stutter, so I don't really mind if that happens. But if you're just not in the right mindset to go live, and then, someone's running the teleprompter, there's just like all these factors of trust that you need. And if the trust factor isn't there, then everyone's going to fail. And I think that's kind of the burnt out factor for me, was there were so many aspects that I needed to rely on other people. And it was just exhausting. It was just like, I didn't like news. I'm not a news person. I was sports. I like theater. I like music. I always just wanted to be, as Leslie Odom Jr. says, in the room where it happens. The room where it happens. Like that was always me. I just wanted to be in the room, chat with the people who make the things happen, get backstage. Like that was kind of my dream. And in order to make part of that dream happen, I also had to be a news reporter. So I would do the Friday Night Lights, West Texas football. That was amazing. That was crazy, going live after a big win. So cool. But that also meant doing news. And I was very ready to go after my contract was up.
It's exhausting. It's an exhausting life, and it doesn't leave you a lot of time for personal life, which is what I had found. I remember somebody saying to me, "Oh, you want to have a family? You want to like have a dog?" No. Right. So when did you decide to marry your love of theater with your journalism background?
Yeah. Sometimes I think the world just has your back and the universe really aligns these things. And at the end of 2018, my contract was ending, like the last day. There was some new management, so contracts were changing, and it was kind of like you could opt to just like at the end of the 2 years, the end of the year, you were good to go. And I was pretty sure I was ready to go. Some people were like, you should stick with it, or you should stick in the journalism field. And I was like, I'm not planning on leaving journalism. I'm planning on leaving this on-air talent life and making my own thing. And I was just listening to a lot of podcasts about Broadway and thinking like, I could do that. And then I would make all these theater references in the Trending Now segment, which you can actually watch on my bwaySHO Facebook page.
Yes, you sing, I love it.
Thank you. It was so much fun. And I realized like I was getting so much joy out of it. Like, even though I was exhausted doing it, there's this like proud exhaustion. I'm sure you know that feeling where you're like, I'm exhausted, but I love what I'm doing, so I can just keep powering through. and that's the energy I was getting. And so I was doing the Trending Now segment. I was getting a lot of really positive responses of people being like, I wish my news reporter, made references like this. And then I just would like check out all these theater websites and, Limbo. We have a visitor. He might just sit right out there. Oh, there he is.
He is more than welcome. Oh my gosh, he's so cute. I feel like he should have his own social media account because he's so adorable.
It's so funny you should say that. I've thought about it. But he joins. You can find much Slimbo talk on bwaySHO, but I know it's basically bwaySHO and Slimbo if we had a joint thing.
Yes.
So as my co-host here knows, when that was all happening, I'm very fortunate that I'm from New York. So I know that this big move would be very difficult for a lot of people to just be like, I'm going to move from Texas to New York and I'm going to start my own website and make it all happen. And if I get hired, great. And if not, I'm just going to, manifest everything. And I was very fortunate because I saved up money, I sold my car, and Slimbo, he is just not having it. If you hear, if it's too distracting, let me know.
Oh, no problem.
Okay. So yeah, I drove across the country in my little car and then I sold it. And I had enough money to live in the city for a couple of months and make a lot of connections. And because I grew up just loving Broadway and being a fan, I kind of had that street smart strategy of, you can get rush tickets and standing room and lottery. And then I was lucky to get press tickets too. So I was doing these pre-show and post-show reports, interviewing fans from the stage door, and then you just start making connections. And then I was fortunate to meet people at Theater Pizzazz, and that's when I started doing freelancing for other people. And then New York Theater Guide, I started covering opening nights and the Tony Awards, and it was just this like crazy thing in a year. It's very hard to believe that in 1 year I went from being an on-air reporter in Texas to covering the Tony Awards. I mean, that just is bonkers to me.
Right. Crazy. So how has the pandemic, obviously New York shut down, theater shut down everywhere. So how did the pandemic affect what you were doing, your career, your freelance work?
Yeah. I mean, it was certainly a pivot because I was covering these events. I was very fortunate that I was covering events almost like every day, every other day. It was just a lot of running around and then you go home and edit and then maybe you go see a show the next day. It was just nonstop. And then the pandemic hits and there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. And I spoke to my boyfriend and it just made sense because I live with my grandma in New York and I didn't think it would be safe to live with a now 91-year-old during a pandemic. So I flew out here basically like 2 days after the pandemic hit and Broadway shut down. And that was a really great decision because we have Slimbo and all this space and stuff. But at the at the same time, there were so many things that weren't happening in New York that it felt like okay being here. So then I started the SHO Must Go Online and bwaySHO the podcast, and I got all this equipment. And when I started doing interviews, I think 2 weeks after, because there was so much those first 2 weeks that like there were all these benefits, and I wanted that to just like breathe and whatever happened. And then I decided the SHO Must Go Online. It's kind of a cute pun and it's very appropriate. And I asked Joe Iconis and Lauren Marcus, and they were my first guests. And what was really special about that was that Be More Chill was the first opening night I got to cover. Yeah,
I love that. So I was going to ask you about your first show and how that happened, because that's a pretty big get.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate.
Yeah. So how was it talking to him? Because his career has just over the last few years skyrocketed into superstardom.
Yeah, Joe Iconis is a rock star and is one of the nicest humans. It's been really special. I mentioned that Be More Chill was the first opening night I got to cover, but also like it's really been a Joe Iconis through line through the last few years, which is I saw them at the Guggenheim before they went to Broadway. There was this like works in process event. I went there. It was so cold. They were like, be more warm. Ha 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 ha. It was very funny. It was great. So then I saw first preview on Broadway, just got like a rush ticket, got great seats, saw it was amazing. Then I covered opening night. And then I started covering the post-show hangs on Wednesday nights. They would do that and invite a lot of friends to perform. That was cool. Then I covered opening night at Broadway Bounty Hunter off Broadway, and then Love and Hate Nation at Two River Theater. So all that being said is that like I love Joe Iconis and family. I love everything they put out there and the great energy and the diversity and how willing they are to just like connect with their fans, which I think is so special. So I think it's tough because him and Lauren, like they had these like huge moments, and then Broadway happens and they're still working on these other projects. I know Joe and Rob Rokiki are working on this musical together, this punk rock girl. It sounds really awesome. And then of course, I think it would be unfair to not mention so I'm not a critic. I'm a theater reporter. There are some people who are both. I am not. I am like a positive only site type thing, right? I think there's like enough criticism, but they unfortunately didn't get great reviews, and it felt very harsh to me because there's this whole narrative going on that like theater can't be for teens. Like if teens and people who enjoy this kind of fun, energetic theater, like that's not sophisticated enough. I just don't get it. Like I saw Be More Chill, I think 5 or 6 times, and I had such a great time every time. Like I was at closing night, it was so emotional. Like there's clearly this love for this show. And just because like a straight white guy says that it's not for everyone, all of a sudden ticket sales are going down. And now a lot of people from around the world and around the country and the country, the world, like everywhere wanted to come see this show. It had a shorter run than expected. And it's just really unfortunate. And that's something that how much can one person change? I don't know. But I've been trying really hard to have this positive site to just talk about, like, especially with the fans, like, yes, I also love this show. You are not crazy for loving the show that brings you so much joy. And there should be more acceptance and appreciation for shows that just bring people joy. Everything doesn't have to be serious. If that's what they're going for, then cool. But there's such a beautiful nature of going to a show and just having a great time with your friends and family, or going by yourself and making that nice connection with the stranger. I just think that's so beautiful. And I wish that Be More Chill and The Lightning Thief,
Lightning Thief. I know that's exactly what I was thinking of, The Lightning Thief.
I love the humans behind it so much, and I really enjoy those shows. Like I listen to those cast albums all the time. I say that online, but like I really mean it. I listen to them all the time because they make me so happy. And what's so wrong about being happy, y'all?
There is nothing wrong with it. And, it's interesting because I do the arts journalism side of this. So I do a lot of interviews, more so now during the pandemic for sure. Mm-hmm. And I also do theater criticism. And what I learned really early on was there's a lot of shows where I'm not the target audience. And if I'm not the target audience, then it's not really fair for me to go in and go, I didn't like this, because it's clear it wasn't written for me. Lightning Thief is one of those shows. Be More Chill is one of those shows. And so I actually brought in a reviewer. She's 16 years old now, but she was 15 years old when I started with her. And I was like, you know what? These shows are meant for you. So you go and review them. I'll go with you. I'll watch. And I found that going with her and seeing it through her eyes, I was like, oh, I totally get it. This is a good show. Be More Chill is one of those shows, because I was like, oh, I get it. Lightning Thief wasn't my favorite. She loved it. And so I was like, okay, then it hit the mark. And you and I both know Broadway won't survive unless we nurture those young, enthusiastic Broadway goers. So more power to you.
Thank you. Yeah. Because I was that that kid that saw 13 in previews, and then once it opened, like, I love that show. I went with my camp friends, and I still sing 13, when will I get it? 13, all of the grown-up stuff. Like, I love that music. And to me, that must be what it's like for the audiences in Be More Chill and The Lightning Thief, which is something about people their age, and they're connecting with it. And it's just like, it's so special. And I even met a lot of parents and grandparents at Be More Chill and The Lightning Thief being like, I'm so happy I could be here with my teenager and, experience this together. And they're so happy. And it's just like, wow, these shows are bringing families together and connecting people, and just like, it's all positive. I wish more people would have the foresight to bring a reviewer that was more the target audience. And so,
and we need young reviewers too, young writers, emerging
definitely.
journalists. Otherwise, our field is going to die. So it's like, come on.
Yeah. And I'll just say this to anyone who's watching now or in the future. If you're a young theater reporter and you have any questions, like, you can always reach out to me, like at bwaySHO on everything. I love helping the future because I was helped by a lot of people, and I think it's important to pay it forward.
Me too. And that's why I think, and there's another news arts entertainment outlet here in Raleigh, and they have a 9-year-old, a mother-son team, and they review together. And I always say he is my favorite reviewer in town because he's 9 and he just says it like it is. So he saw Cinderella and he's like, that fairy godmother, she's the real deal. I was like, this is my favorite review ever.
Yeah, I love it. I think we need more of that.
Yeah. So do you remember your first Broadway show?
It's a great question. The answer is I'm not 100% sure, because I remember seeing Hairspray in 4th grade with my teen travel camp. And I'm sure I saw shows before that with my family because we all love Broadway. But I like to say Hairspray was like the first show that I saw on Broadway and like fell in love with it and said, like, this is going to change my life. So we saw that on a teen travel trip. And then we did like a trip to Baltimore, and we all were singing Good Morning, Baltimore. It was perfect. So that Hairspray totally changed my life. Yeah.
Now, were you ever on the performing side, or were you always a fan?
Yeah, I was in all the musicals in high school, and I was in High School Musical when we did that, and we did Guys and Dolls, and then it just so happened that they were also doing Guys and Dolls on Broadway, and we got to go as a cast and see it on Broadway and meet Lauren. Oh my God, what's her name? Graham. Thank you. Oh my God, Gilmore Girls. That was
Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist.
Yes. Bernadette Peters. What? It's crazy.
Oh my gosh, I love that show. If you're a Broadway fan and you're not watching Zoe's, there is something wrong with you. You must watch that show. Yeah. I love that show. So what was your first big Broadway interview? Was it Joe Iconis, or was it somebody before that?
Good question. Trying to think of the timeline. It all happened so fast. So that was like late January was the Guggenheim event. And then I want to say, gosh, this is, I was just like interviewing people on the streets, and I feel like I got to interview some like theater people there, but this is so interesting. I should know this. This is a great question. You've really stumped me. I love this.
It's good.
Yeah.
Will you post it later? Will you think about it and post it later so we can?
100%.
I'm always curious.
Yeah, it's so funny. I'm really trying to remember in this January to March, because I think Be More Chill opening night was March 10th or March 13th. I always get those confused in my head because there were some things going on at the same time. One of those 2 dates was the Be More Chill opening night. And I'm sure that I did interviews between late January and March. That time. But I'm going to think about this and I will get back to you.
Okay. I will be very curious. So have you had, who's been, I'll start with this one. Who's been your favorite interview? Or who's like the person that you love? Like when you call them, they're coming to play. They're showing up.
Yeah. Well, I have to now just put like Joe and Lauren aside because they're just on a different level of like, I'm so grateful. They always say yes. So like, I love them. And I've talked about them a lot. So I'm going to just put them here as like, know that they are on the same
placeholders. They're
right there. This other person who I just like, I'm so grateful. They're actually coming back for a second interview on Monday. So the timing is great, is Alex Brightman.
Yes. I knew you were going to say him because he just has such great energy.
He does. Yeah, and his story of how we met is actually really cool because it once again shows like I love the actors who also love the fans and who like appreciate that like they were once big fans and on the other side of, the barricades and the fan line. But I started doing these interviews at Broadway Bakes, the one at Schmackery's.
Mm-hmm.
They do like Schmackery's says, well, of course, in the before times, and hopefully it'll happen again later. But they do this wonderful thing where they have Broadway actors at Schmackery's like selling cookies and whatnot for Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. So it's really great. Got to interview a bunch of people there, and I interviewed Alex Brightman. And then I went to Broadway in Bryant Park and was doing interviews. And he's like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And he remembered me, and I just thought that was so cool because here I am, like this one-woman band doing everything and like, not a major website. And for him to just like remember me, because sometimes you like to do that thing where it's like, oh yeah, like we met at Broadway Bakes, and it's helpful because they meet so many people. But for him to just like remember, that was so cool. So we did that interview. And then, that interview I put as like a video with all the Beetlejuice performances from Broadway and Bryant Park. And by far, that was the first video that like went viral. I saw it go from like 5,000 to 10,000 to, 60,000. And then it was like 100, 500. It just like blew up, and people would be like messaging me like, oh yeah, I found the Netherlings, this like Beetlejuice Facebook group because of your interview. I was like, oh, that's so exciting. Like that's exactly that's what I'm doing it for. Yeah.
So he'll be with you Monday. That's very exciting. Beetlejuice fans, you got to tune in to SHO's show on Monday.
Yeah.
Any interviews, you don't have to tell me who it is, but maybe you can share the story. But any interviews that didn't go so well?
Oh, I would venture to say that like all the interviews have been great. So I'm just going to like caveat it with that. But I will say sometimes like if I'm not feeling great or like there's like an awkward energy, then I just feel awkward. And like if I ask a question, and I'm sure you've been like this too, where you ask a question and then they give you like a 1 or 2 word sentence answer, and then you try again, and then it's like, I'm trying to engage, what's going on? And then usually like as they get more comfortable, it goes throughout. Like I always just try to remember that not everyone is comfortable being in front of a camera, even if they are an actor, if they're a writer, they're a stagehand. Like some people are really comfortable in what they do. And then you think like, oh, it's just an interview, you're just talking about yourself. But some people get really uncomfortable. So I try always to remember that even if they're starting off slow, that what can I do as the interviewer to make them feel more comfortable? And hopefully then they'll open up. And that's really how it's gone. And I would also say that like at the beginning of the pandemic, I thought like this has to hit like an hour mark, right? For no like real reason, I was like, maybe YouTube will favor it more if it's an hour long, but sometimes then, you're trying to stretch, and sometimes like a 45-minute interview is great, or a half-hour interview. Like they don't have to be long. And then sometimes I've done like an hour and a half interview. And one time with my friend, I did like a 2.5 hour interview just because like that's how it was. And taking that pressure off of it has to be this or that, I feel like made it more comfortable for everyone.
And that's kind of the beauty of what we're doing in this medium, because we have that flexibility. It's not you have 3 minutes to tell this story and go, or you have 30 minutes. It's, oh, if it lasts 42 minutes, it's all right. It's good. Um, so do you feel like you've worked in radio, you've worked in television, now you're doing this? I have so many friends who have worked for traditional news outlets, but during this pandemic, they were furloughed, they've been fired. Sadly, arts journalism in mainstream media seems to be dwindling. Are you and I, is this the future of arts journalism, what we're doing on these platforms?
I'm trying to think of the right words to say it, but I hope so. I think there's a beauty of people who are so passionate about what they're doing that they say, I need to do this. Like, I could be doing something else and I need to be doing this. And people really gravitate towards that. And I think about this all the time, but how grateful I am, the timing that, like, I could have been, if this pandemic happened 2 years ago, my whole situation would have been so different. Or even really, like, if it happened a year before and I had only started doing the theater journalism and I didn't really have that base yet, that everything would have been so different and I wouldn't have had these connections. So I hope that, let me back up. I think there's a great need for the small market journalism that I was doing as well. I think that there's these communities and these stories that need to be told, and you need to hold people accountable. So having that is so important. Same goes with small market newspapers. And then the big market also, they need to be covering all these things. All that being said, I hope that a lot of people find these type of interviews, because they're, at least for me, like, I have a Patreon. And so, like, the people who I need to answer to are my fans, are the supporters. And I think there's something really beautiful about, like, them holding me accountable and me being honest and truthful to them. And, like, I couldn't do this without them. And they apparently like what I'm doing enough to support me every month. And I really love that. I think there's something so nice about not having to be like, I don't need to fill a certain time slot. I don't need to do this or that. Like, they just like whatever I think is, like, the right move. So I was being told, hey, I think if you turn these interviews into a podcast, that would be really great and you'd reach more people. So that's what I did. Like, I only started bwaySHO, the podcast, because my community asked for it. And I love that, like, this give and take of, this is what journalism is. We spoke at the beginning of this interview that, like, a lot of the skills I learned at CBS 7, like being on air, having to go live, having to write this stuff, having to do all this stuff inside and out by yourself, really helped me now run my own business and run bwaySHO.com, because now I'm like, oh, I can just do that. And now eventually I'd love to make enough money that I could hire an assistant or hire someone to film. That would, honestly, when theater comes back and we're doing all this stuff, that's the hardest thing, is being able to, like, film yourself at these events and doing these interviews. So that would be wonderful. Having a photog, like, with me at all times. Yes. A+.
I can't tell you how many times I've shown up, as recently as last week, I was asked to cover an event and showed up with my little camera phone and my little microphone. Yeah. And I'm, like, juggling the camera. And at one point I asked the publicist, I'm like, okay, you hold this. And I'll hold this. I was like, because it's just me. And in that case, I did have somebody with me, and occasionally I'd say to him, okay, you get to hold the phone now and make sure, like, it's pointed, because we're it. But I think also people like that kind of, when I first started, I wanted everything to be perfect and pristine and edited wonderfully. And I'm realizing people kind of like the rawness also of not being perfect. So
yeah, actually, to that point, like, I am such a perfectionist that sometimes between that and my anxiety, like, I just won't put out this video that I've been working on because I'm like, it's not perfect yet. And what I really love about doing the live interview series is that, like, it's live. Whatever happens, like it is out there. I don't have to think about the, editing or whatnot. But I also I really love some of the opening night stuff that I have done with covering and doing these interviews and overlaying the video and then underlaying the music. Like I love that product. But I think now there's this healthy balance of both having the raw and not having to worry about it. And then when I want to have this pristine thing, it's a separate thing and I can live happily in both worlds. And also
yeah. I definitely feel that. I definitely have found that to be true. I feel like there's space for both, but I think what sets us apart from the CBSs and the NBCs is kind of this man on the street. It's me and my phone and my microphone, pretty much.
Yeah, totally. And I would have my friends, I call them my trusty sidekicks, because they would, it's a cool thing to be able to say hey, if you come here, you can help me cover an opening night and, whatever experience that comes with. And then if I get a free second ticket, it goes to you. So, that's a fun thing. But yeah, being just on your own or with a friend or someone else, and I've definitely had that with a publicist, can you just tap the face to make sure it's in focus, and then am I in frame? Oh my goodness, so many times.
It's so crazy. So any bucket list celebrities you'd want to interview? Any people you must have people on your bucket list.
Yeah. So, the most obvious one that I've spoken about a lot is I've interviewed Lin-Manuel Miranda, fortunately, at an event. But that was one of those 1-2 question things. I would love to have a sit down with him just because I'm a huge Hamilton fan and In the Heights. And there's so many things, so many of his products that he's put out into the universe that I just would love to deep dive and ask some of these questions. That being said, that obvious one being said, I've also it's so funny. I've had these daydreams of meeting David Beckham again now and having this conversation back when I was 18, you were the first big celebrity I got to interview, and just he was so nice. I can't overemphasize how I was the only female in the room. I was the only one under 20 in the room, and he made sure I got a question in. And I thought that was so special to have someone at his height be able to know the situation and make sure that happens. So I would love to be able to talk to him now, 11 years later, 20 years, whatever it might be, and just say this might have been a small moment for you, but it really changed my trajectory. So someone like him, and then, I'm just I'm a huge comic book fan and I love superhero things. So anyone in that universe. And there are a lot of anyone from OG Hamilton that would be really cool. I did get to interview Mandy Gonzalez, which was so cool. And I talked to her about how Breathe was one of my favorite songs from In the Heights, and how that really helped me. The first time I ever went live as an anchor, I did a lot of reporting, but the noon anchor spot, someone couldn't get there. And so I had 15 minutes and they were you're going on. I'm I've never done this before. And they're you're going to figure it out. And I listened to Breathe as I was putting on my makeup and getting ready. And it was the one thing that just calmed me down and got me in the mood. So really, she was right up there.
So do you ever get starstruck?
I sometimes have that feeling in my throat where I'm just be cool, just get the words out there. I starstruck's an interesting word. I think it's more that I'm overwhelmed by how they're so famous, but when they're really nice, it really helps me out. I don't know if this is a weird thing to say, but when I interviewed Paul Rudd, he was so personable that he makes you forget that he is Paul Rudd and so famous. So with him, I was so casual and I couldn't believe how casual I was, because I'm it's Paul Rudd. And, the same thing, I don't know if you got to see Seawall of Life, but with Jake Gyllenhaal, I covered the opening night, and he, once again, is massive celebrity and just looks you in the eye and talks to you like a human being. And so these moments where I kind of anticipated being starstruck, I was taken off guard by how nice they were and how casual they are. So, I think honestly, I think if I have the opportunity to do like a one-on-one sit-down interview with Lynn, there's gonna be a few minutes where I'm just gonna have to be like, be cool. Like, he knows you're a fan. He knows you're a journalist. You'll just like be able to fangirl for a second professionally. I think also, okay, I'm going on a little tangent here, but you were talking about, the beauty of being your own, like a one person job, like MMA and all this stuff. And I think, when you're covering sports or news, you don't have the option to be a fangirl because there's just not really a space for that. But I think theater, there's this beauty of like, we chose this profession because we love theater. And so having this connection and being able to tell people like Mandy, like, I love this music that you put out there. And even just as recently this week, I interviewed Joey Contreras and Brian Russell Carey. And I was like, I love In Pieces and I love your music. They really appreciate that. So I try to like be as professional and it's like showing you that I'm a fan and that I'm like, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. Like that to me is, I think, this beautiful combination of, yes, we're professional reporters, but we're also big fans. And I think fans like to see reporters who actually care this much. So that's my long-winded way of saying, like, I think I might get a little starstruck, but I'll be able to like channel that energy and it'll be the best of both worlds because fans love to see that.
I love that. And they are kind of, I once interviewed Laura Haywood, Broadway girl, NYC, and she said kind of a similar thing. She's like, the fans kind of live vicariously through you. So when you're covering that opening night or you're speaking as a celebrity, you're kind of like representing everybody, and so you can be a little bit fangirly. There's only been one time where I was like a crazy person, but only once. And it was during this pandemic. One of the very first interviews I was asked to do was with Robert Newman, who is a good stage actor. But I will forever know him as Josh Lewis on Guiding Light. I grew up watching Guiding Light. I think I watched the show for 10 or 15 years. He was on it for 20. And so he emailed me to set up the interview. And I was like, Josh Lewis has my email. He knows I exist. And it was one of the few times where we went on early and I got it all out before we went on. So I could act like a normal person on camera.
I feel like I could also make an addendum and say Anissa Folds and Fergie L. Philippe and L. Morgan Lee, like, as part of the people who just like, I messaged them and they were like, oh my God, I'm happy to. And Eliza Oman and Nick Walker, like when I started the podcast and I needed the voiceover, for the intro, and they just said yes. I don't take any of that for granted. Like, these are people on Broadway and they are taking the time to do a voiceover for me or just be on my series. Like, anyone who says yes to be on my series, even if they say like, I have a 30-minute slot and I can only do, I'm like, oh my God, I would take 20 with you. So I just,
Fergie is Fergie the most amazing human being? He did Ragtime here.
I love.
Prior to going back to New York to do Hamilton, and just a wonderful human.
So nice, so personable, like makes you feel so welcomed and that like your opinion really matters. I think there's something really special about that when you're appreciating their work and they also appreciate you. He's a good person.
Lovely person. Well, as are you. I'm so glad we did this. I just feel like we have just so much in common. And like I said, everybody needs to follow bwaySHO on social media. You can find her on Facebook. You can find her everywhere on YouTube. You can watch the series and go to the website. You can find out all the information about upcoming guests. She's got some good ones. Alex Brightman on Monday, so I'll be tuning in for that. I'm a big fan. So thank you. Thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you.
And that wraps up our very busy week. It's been like a crazy week here at Bway to Broadway. So I'm going to take a couple of days off and I will see everybody Monday-ish. I've got some really good things cooked up for you next week, guys. So just keep watching the social media and I'll put it out either tonight or tomorrow. But thank you, SHO. This was awesome. And just have a good weekend. Stay safe and healthy. And I hope to get to meet you in person when I come to New York next.
That would be the best. And thank you. This has been so wonderful. It's great to have the tables turned a little bit.
Yes. It keeps us on our toes. So
definitely.
And how crazy is it? You're in Washington State. You're wearing your summer clothes. It's like 50 degrees out today. It's so cold. And so I'm like, okay, break up.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Anyway, take care and I will see you soon, hopefully. And everybody just follow SHO on social media and everyone have a good weekend.
Bye, y'all.